to our amazing VIP guests from Craghoppers and LanzaTech and our industry visitors. Can't remember all of the people that are here, but I know we've got people from the UKFT and we've got some independent people here as well. I'm really delighted that you've chosen and asked if you can come here to do this today. Thank you so much. So we're going to have a presentation, but first of all, Jo is going to do a Q&A with Nicola. Jo is the owner of Craghoppers, which was your family business?
It's a family business, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to hand over to Nicola. Hopefully you'll be able to hear everybody because we don't have roving mics, but I think the acoustics are quite good in here. But if you can't, just let us know if you can hear. Okay? Thanks very much.
Okay, so I'm going to take Jo through some of the questions, and I know some of you as master's students will have some questions, and we've got other staff here. This is a really fantastic opportunity for us to bring the science of textiles and supply chain together with the brand. You know, we're really, really lucky. This is a first off for us, so thank you for
Lovely to be here.
To do it. So I just wanted you to tell us a bit more about Craghoppers and what has driven your company to be involved in sustainability.
Absolutely. Hi everybody, I'm Joanne from Crags, and I have Charlotte and James and Kai with me who are here. I hope you can all hear me. We are a third generation family business. So I say to poor James, I'm a fixed cost, you know, we're here, I can't get rid of me. My grandfather used to have raincoat factories in Manchester, and we developed the business into Craghoppers, an outdoor and travel clothing brand, and we're part of a big regatta group. And the most important thing about our business is that it's set up on very clear values. So my father, who was a big inspiration to me, always said the most important thing is having true honesty and integrity in your business. And you're bigger than your product, you're bigger than your brand. It's what we can also do in the community. So sustainability has always been very much at the heart of what we do. Even before it was even called sustainability or ethical trading, we always were very much involved with that. So very deep foundations based on relationships and honesty and integrity. I hope that answers that question.
That's a fabulous answer. And it's interesting because I was at Aquascutum, which was also raincoat, so similar kind of longevity and background. So really fabulous that you won the Draper's Sustainable Fashion Brand of the Year 2020.
Yes,
what other accolades and accreditations have you got? There's a few clues.
Yes. We were really thrilled to win Sustainable Brand of the Year in 2020, and last year we were nominated to be Brand of the Year as well. We've won awards in our industry for product. We attend every year, twice a year, the ISPO show, which is the International Sportswear Show. We've won for this fleece. We won an award for this fleece. We've won awards for our footwear, for our bags as well, and we've been nominated for numerous awards along the way, which is a lovely stamp for a pat on the back for the team who worked so hard on all of the products. So it's lovely to be recognised. So proud of the awards.
And the accreditations on the screen here, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition.
These are the associations that we're members of.
Okay, that's great. That's really good to know. You've just released your second sustainability report.
Yes.
How did this all come about, and how have you found out about the brand? What have you discovered in doing that?
So as I said, sustainability and ethical trading has been really part and parcel of everything that we've done from the very beginning. And nobody, years and years ago, were very much interested in it. And we wrote our sustainability report 2 years ago, and actually we got a lot of our customers and our consumers were really fascinated by it. And we realised that actually good practice is to update it every 2 years. Writing the report that's just been published on our website, loads of things have changed in interim. We write our report based on GRI principles, which is the best sustainable principles And what it asks you to do to begin with is to send a survey to all of your stakeholders and ask them what is important about the brand. What are the key things that they really are bothered about? And they came up with the top 3 things that they were really interested in. Was about longevity and quality of the product. That was the number 1 thing that people really are interested in. The second thing that they're interested in was the conditions in the factory and how we look after our workers. And the third thing they're interested in is how we invest in sustainability and things going forward. So that really helps us, reconfirms exactly what we're doing. So I think, yeah, it was a really interesting report. So you'll find, I won't go through all of the detail, but if you're interested, I don't know how many pages is it, 32 pages.
Yeah.
It's quite a meaty thing to read, but yeah, all of it fabulous.
They're good at reading meaty reports. I think I put 6 up last week, we'll add this onto the Black Ode Essential Reading. So these associations
Yes.
that you work with,
Yes.
how have they supported you with your sustainable journey, and what kind of discoveries
Okay.
about where you needed maybe to make improvements, or where you were doing good things already?
So on the board you can see 2 key associations that we're members of. The Ethical Trade Initiative. We've been members of the Ethical Trade Initiative for 12 years. Right from the early get-go, it was always very important to survey our factories, to use third-party auditors in our factories. And we decided to join ETI just to benchmark ourselves again, what is best practice in the we actually think that the standard, we go above and beyond. So with checking conditions in our factories, we go as far as doing well-being surveys in our factories. So the third-party audits are kind of hygiene, and we check that. Everybody who comes into the factories, all of the buyers, merchandisers, the product control people, the quality people, all will check fire extinguishers, first aid boxes, everything as a matter of course on every single factory visit. But we go above and beyond. We do this well-being survey in our factories, asking the workers, so tell us, how is it at the end of every month? Do you have enough money? Do you feel safe in the factories? And because we work with the same factories, I think I was telling somebody today that 75% of our factories and all of our fabric mills we've worked with for over 25 years. We don't chop and change. So they all know us very well. So we can ask questions and they can give us honest answers on a wellbeing survey. So we can really understand properly, what is going on in our factory. So that's the ETI. Sustainable Apparel Coalition, I don't know if you guys know Sustainable Apparel Coalition, but the most sustainable companies in the world are members of the SAC. And they own the they work with the Higgs Index. It used to be part of them and they've just split. And the Sustainable Apparel Coalition is fantastic. They help us to work collaboratively with other brands and other people. And also we have to survey ourselves using the Higgs method, or we have to survey our brands using the BRM, survey all our facilities using their FDM, and we can really judge our factories and ourselves against industry, the best industry standard. And we are in the top 20% of the very best sustainable businesses in the world. So I'm really, really proud of that. It's not always easy. We challenged a lot on, but it helps us and it focuses us, and the team and everybody in our team is really super keen, as you can imagine. If the business, you attract people like yourself, so all of our team really want to improve year on year. So that's that one. The Fashion for Climate is the part of the UNFCCC, which is the Fashion Charter, about CO2. And also that is a massive programme on working out our CO2. We've got challenges and we've signed up to be to reduce our carbon by 50% by 2030 and to be zero at 2050. 2050, thank goodness, is a long way away,
yes,
because it's very, very hard.
To be involved in
Yeah, you guys
we
can
might
do
be
the 2050. Exactly. But yeah, so those are the, and the Higgs Index is what we use to measure our And then up there are some other pictures which I think relate to another question.
Okay. So you are so knowledgeable about all of those things. Because I teach some of this and go through the science of it. And it's absolutely for business owners to understand all of those things in the detail you do. I think it's really brilliant. So what are your challenges for the brand currently?
Well, lots of challenges, obviously. We are an accessible brand, so we don't have our product. We were looking at some fantastic garments, weren't we, Andrew? We were looking at some fantastic garments that were £600, £800 for a jacket. Our brand is an accessible brand, so that's the big challenge, to ensure that we can commercialise sustainability. So we're really proud that this gorgeous fleece, that thank goodness Freya is going to explain the science of it, is a commercial piece. It comes in at £80, which is probably maybe 20% more expensive than a non-sustainable fleece. So that's our challenge, bringing things in sustainable. Being pioneers, asking things to our factories that they've never discussed before and never thought about before. How we react to when people say no to us. My daughter said it's really bad. I said, well, we don't accept no until they say it 5 times. She said, you can't say that to anybody, Mum. That's just terrible. But it's true. We kind of say, we try and work with people when things are really difficult. So, and try and find a smart way of working around things. So, yes, being pioneers, I think, is the most difficult thing.
You pointed out, recycled or better textiles are often 20% more than the non-good, genuine, normal thing, and that building relationships, isn't it? About having the chance to be able to say no, and not showing them the door or them showing you the door. So, what are your highs?
Oh, so many things. So many things I'm really proud of. Obviously, proud of all the awards, proud of having produced this and bringing this to market, really proud of that. But lots of the social impact programmes that we're involved with, I'm really proud of, which would be the other things going on the other pictures. So I think there's one picture of our factory, one of our partners in Bangladesh, where we have a women's health education programme there. And we've been running a health education programme for about 12 years, teaching women about themselves and their bodies, and how that they don't need to take 5 days off work every month, and how really fantastic about family planning, about financial planning and that kind of thing. And we're taking it to the next level, that we have, we're now talking to our partners about having quotas for women managers and women supervisors in all of the factories, which is really fabulous, and I think it's starting to show shoots. We're really excited about that. I'm proud of that. Then you've got a picture of our school. We have a school in Bangladesh for disabled and able children, which we've been running for, I don't know, about 20 years. I'm trying to think, about 20 years, which is amazing. We have a scholarship class. I'm looking for a doctor to come from the school, but really in the garment clothing area outside Dhaka, and a very poor area, and we provide lunch for the mums and lunch for the kids, and we have 2 sessions, and it's really heartwarming and really fantastic. We're very involved. We don't just give money. I know somebody in my team knows what the lunch is today and what the curriculum is, and we know the names of the students, and we're really, really involved there. I think, yes, and I love going to graduation. It's just fantastic. It's really heartwarming, amazing.
Such a wonderful involvement, and actually not just giving money, but seeing change in action. I think that's really good. Wonderful. This is the real veer off into, why did you choose to work with LanzaTech? Freya's over there. And what made you settle on a fleece of that particular fibre?
Okay, so why do we work with LanzaTech? Everybody we work with throughout our organisation has the same values as us. So it's really important to find partners that you can work with for a long time who really understand the world like you see it. And the teams get that through all of our connections. So all the connections that Charlotte would have in our marketing teams, or PR, or our ambassadors would have the same values. So it's always finding partners that have the same values as us. yes, we've been looking for new sustainable fibres for a very, very long time, and we, you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. This is definitely our print. Why did we use fleece? Because we want it to be accessible for as many people as possible. So we're starting off with fleece. We just had our range launch for autumn/winter 24, where we've shown the wider collection, which is using this material but in jackets, waterproof jackets, in trousers, other big wonderful ball jackets as well. So it started off here, but it's going to continue. The science is incredible of how we are using, it's a negative carbon, I think, is it negative carbon free? Taking carbon from the atmosphere to make this wonderful product. It was very important that our customers and our consumers would love the product. So it has to be designed beautifully, and it has to feel great. You say something's made of pollution, but actually it feels horrible, it feels great. And we worked with LanzaTech and our fabric mill in order to really achieve something that was commercial and beautiful and ticked all those boxes. Yeah.
I think that's a mistake a lot of brands have made when they've tried to produce something so ethical.
Yeah.
No one wants.
But no, absolutely.
Yeah. So customers really care about longevity of clothing.
Yes.
How is that included in your product design? How important is aftercare and recycling?
So, quality and longevity, the first thing that came up on our stakeholder survey. We have offered guarantee for life for our product, for Craghoppers forever, which means that everybody is really focused on all the materials, all the trims, absolutely everything. We really test our product to the hilt, and we have to ensure that if we're saying guaranteed for life, it can really work. Lots of user trials and lots of stuff like that. And then aftercare is really important. We team up with Timpsons in order to do any repairs. We're madly focused on returns or any failures, madly focused on that. And at the end of the day, if there are garments that fail, they go to this amazing organisation which I've been chatting about called New Life, who take our damaged garments, used product, and then sell them for charity. They sell them for they're another fantastic contact that we have, a fantastic partner, and they sell the product, repair the product, and then to sell it. And if they can't sell it, it goes into making insulation, 0 to landfill. We need that, 0 to landfill, and any profit they make goes for equipment for disabled children. So they're really a wonderful organisation. So it all goes back to the very beginning about what my father said, which is, you've got to be bigger than your business, you've got to be really fantastic in the community, and we really feel that we do that all the way around. Everybody, we hope, that touches our brand, it sounds very cheesy, but everyone that touches our brand, our product, should have an enhanced feeling after that. So, yeah.
And knowledge about the transparency with these associations, and particularly about responsible sourcing. And this is my last question. How do you go above and beyond in working with your factories? You've kind of touched on that already. Touched on that already. I mean, ethical trade initiative is quite a low benchmark, really, isn't it? You're doing a lot more, certainly with schools and well-being for machinists. Do you know the spread of where you're making, what countries you're making? There's a lot in Bangladesh.
Yes, we're making in Bangladesh and in China, and socks in Portugal. I have to say, the only thing in Europe, sadly, mainly. But as I said, the factories that we've worked with, they really are our partners, and we've worked with the same factories for over 25 years. We really know them all very well. So that's how, and we're in the factories all the time. They know us really well. We do go absolutely above and beyond, but we still have to go visit. Even with the best factories, we still have to go visit. We still need to absolutely check what's going on. So COVID, doing everything by Teams or Zoom, I think we lost a bit because we like to have the other conversations. I like to be with the the factory owners and their families, and you know, we're very full. Yes, so I'm very happy. I can sleep at night that I know that there won't be a TV documentary about us.
Yes,
I absolutely know.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's a really nice note to end on, Joanne. Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much. Thank you.
So we're moving quickly on to invite Freya to the stage. Good luck. This is Freya from LanzaTech, and she's going to take you through the science behind this development.
Hi everybody, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
I'm not used to standing sort of stationary using a clicker, so I kind of wander a bit, so hopefully you can hear me when I speak. And, I'm from a company called LanzaTech, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the science behind some of the new synthetic fibres that exist today. Some of the things that Joanne was talking about in terms of sourcing new materials is really becoming increasingly important in fashion design and fashion sustainability, and we are just sort of one of the technology companies that you might want to think about as you're designing clothes in the future. We're a public company now, so I have to put that disclaimer thing, but don't you worry about that. Although we're being recorded, so if my lawyers are watching, it was really well read. So I want to start off, I really love something that Joanne was saying about people saying no, because we've experienced that a lot in our life, because what we came up with as a concept was considered crazy or impossible. And so I wanted just to start with a couple of predictions that have been made over the last 100+ years. And while I never want people to read slides, these are quite funny, you can probably just glimpse through them. That's an amazing invention. Who would ever want to use one of them? I mean, everyone in this room's got a phone. And so it's thinking about, you know, the phone, the first phone. Heavier than air machines are impossible. There's a world market for maybe 5 computers. Computers may weigh no more than 1.5 tons. No one would want a computer in their home, and one of my favourites, 640k ought to be enough memory for anyone. And I think Nicola will agree that my presentation was about 200 megabytes, so we've quickly surpassed that. But really, the point here is that, you know, predictions are just extrapolations of what we know. It's about the past, and really what I want to talk about today is innovation. And especially in sustainability, innovation is really key, and thinking about things that nobody ever thought about. So I'm going to talk about a technology called gas fermentation, which sounds a bit weird, so please bear with me. But back to this, people thinking we were crazy. So we use bacteria to make chemicals, okay? I'll get there, don't worry. But people said, you're never going to be able to do that. You can't get bacteria to do anything. It's a biological organism. It's going to be very sensitive. And we said, no, we can feed it gas. And they said, no, you can't feed it gas because you can't get gas into what they eat. So using gas isn't going to work. You can't access the genetics, so you can't get them to do anything else. It's just too complicated. Just don't bother. It's just not worth your time. So basically, people told us, forget about it. You're crazy. So we heard no way more than 5 times, and we just thought, well, we're gonna try this. Why were we going to try this? Well, at the time, LanzaTech was founded at a time when there was a movement to make a chemical, ethanol, for fuels. So blending ethanol in road transport fuels. And at the time, the most common thing to make ethanol was food crops, so corn and sugar. So sometimes when you see a kind of a bioethanol type product or plastic made of bio PET, it comes from sugar or corn. But when we think about food crops and how they are grown, they need a lot of land. If we think about cotton, when we're talking to fashion people, I mean, you need a lot of land, you need a lot of water, and that can impact biodiversity, it can impact food prices, and other things. And so we wanted to find a way of sourcing the carbon that would be in sugar and corn from somewhere else. And that's why we wanted to use bacteria. But why did we want to do that? Why are we making ethanol for fuels? Well, ethanol for fuels was used instead of fossil fuels. So LanzaTech was started as a company to find an alternative fuel so we could keep fossil fuels in the ground. Why was that so important? Well, I don't think I need to go into a huge amount of detail about the importance of a better climate future for everybody. We have a big problem. We have a big carbon problem. So this is what we call the carbon curve, and you can see how much more carbon there is in the atmosphere, and this is only over in the last sort of 40 plus years, and it's increasing steadily. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with these stripes. Are people familiar with these stripes? This is showing the temperature change over that time period. So you can see, this is where we are, probably an extra stripe because this is from a year or so ago. You can see it's very hot. In case you didn't realise, red is hot. So it's getting a lot hotter and the temperature is changing. And of course, we see pictures of a polar bear on a piece of ice, but it's more than melting ice caps there. And when we're just looking at people in Bangladesh, we look at flooding in the developing world. We look at increasing temperatures, so people can't actually work outside because their core temperature is rising, because our global temperature is rising. And that's because of this carbon curve. So I like to talk about bending that carbon curve. And so oftentimes when we think about sustainability, we might think about your old windmills, wind turbines, and solar panels or something like that, which is great because power can be carbon-free, and it should be carbon-free. But we ain't going to make a fleece out of solar power yet, maybe in the future. We need a source of carbon. And so what I want to talk about today is the importance of carbon in our daily lives. Because carbon is not just in our cars or in planes or heating our homes, but it's in the products we use. So this is like household cleaner. Carbon is in there, generally fossil carbon. It's in clothes that we wear, so synthetic fibres. It's in the planes that we fly, so you can't, we're of course moving to electric planes, and there are other types of ways of transporting us around the world, but you do need a source of carbon to make fuels, which will also be important when you're all running very large businesses and you have to ship all your stuff around the world. So you've got to think about sustainable transport. Carbon is all around us. These are actually nature's carbon recyclers, as we know. So, we're trying to emulate trees and the biological systems that are all around. And carbon is in all of us. But the most important thing is where that carbon comes from. Because today, most of our carbon comes from underground, from fossil sources. So oil and natural gas and coal, primarily. And we don't want to keep taking carbon out of the ground. We don't want to be making, fibres out of virgin fossil carbon. We don't want to be making packaging out of virgin fossil carbon. And so what we think about is that there's a lot of carbon already above the ground, either in trash, and that's a horrible picture because there's just like rubbish everywhere, and also carbon emissions. It's already out of the ground, and it's in our atmosphere and in the land. It's my mum calling me. Probably going, I hope your talk's going all right. Thanks, Mum. So what we want to do is we want to think about recycling carbon the carbon that already exists above the ground, that's polluting our atmosphere, that's polluting our rivers and oceans and our land. We don't want to be wearing our gorgeous outdoor gear and hiking somewhere and then finding all this rubbish on the hills or rivers sort of choking full of pollution. And so this idea of recycling carbon is about reducing emissions at source and also powering what we call the circular economy. We also call it the circular carbon economy because the idea is you keep carbon going round and round. And so what we do is we can take all these types of carbon-rich waste and we can use it to make new carbon-rich products. So these are just a couple of examples of surprising products that come from recycled carbon emissions. So this is actually a perfume made with Gucci. I don't think anybody would have thought about the House of Gucci making the world's first 100% ethanol. So there's a lot of ethanol in perfume because it distributes the fragrance molecules. It's made from steel mill emissions. So if you think about a steel mill working with the House of Gucci, I mean, mind blown. These are party dresses. We made a capsule collection with Zara a couple of years ago, again made from steel mill emissions. This is a really interesting example because when we think about companies like Zara, we often think about fast fashion. But Zara were really clear that they wanted to look at sustainable fabrics, and they wanted to think about all of the data that went behind it. They wanted to be very transparent with the public about the materials that went into their garments, because they didn't want people to think, well, they're just greenwashing, that's not real. And it was a really interesting experience for us to provide all this data, like the life cycle of a product and so on. And as I said, you can actually power planes. So the jet fuel that today comes from oil under the ground, we can actually convert ethanol, which we now make from steel mill emissions, we can convert it into aviation fuel. And a couple of years ago, 2018, October 2018, I was on a plane that went from Orlando in Florida to Gatwick with Virgin Atlantic, and it was powered by fuel made from steel mill emissions. So we were really expanding the idea of what was possible. But people often thought we were crazy. They thought this was a lab curiosity, that perhaps it was science fiction. But here's a picture of one of our commercial plants. This is one that's in China. We have 4 commercial plants in China, one that's just starting up in Belgium, and one that's starting up in India. So we have sort of global operations. So what is it? Because you're all probably going, okay, I sort of get what you're talking about, but I don't really understand how you're making it. So I'm going to hazard a guess that you might know about beer here, perhaps, or alcohol. It's essentially fermentation. So today, to make beer or wine, you have to take sugars and yeast, and they ferment, and they make alcohol. So if you can imagine, so this is on the site of a steel mill, and you could imagine fitting a brewery onto a steel mill. And instead of sugars and yeast, so yeast is a living organism that eats sugar, we use a bacteria, and this bacteria is very safe. It actually dies in oxygen. So it's sort of, when I say bacteria, everyone's like, ooh. It's very safe. If it's exposed to the atmosphere, to oxygen, it will die. So it's a sort of built-in safety mechanism. Has the same safety rating as yeast. It's very benign. But it loves to eat carbon in gas. So when we started this, I'm a biologist, we were like, well, where can we get a lot of gas from that's available, cheap, in one place that nobody wants? And I'm like, pollution. So we matched up who are the big polluters, steel industry, big polluter, with our bacteria. So you can imagine this is like a little microbrewery in this steel mill, and it's fermenting the pollution with the bacteria bubbling together, and as a part of its natural growth, it makes ethanol. So this is a whole new way of treating emissions and producing ethanol. So we didn't have to think about food crops, we didn't have to think about land, we didn't have to think about water. And so this is the LanzaTech process, and what we do is we can take that pollution, feed it into the system, it bubbles around here, and we make ethanol, which is very nice. We can actually use other types of solid waste. So carbon, as I said, can also pollute rivers and oceans. If we think about trash, we think about landfills. We don't want landfills. And we can take that solid waste, and you can actually turn solid waste into a gas. It's a process called gasification. Basically means superheat it, and it turns into a gas. It's not burning it, which is unfortunately what happens to a lot of landfill. You superheat it, turns into a gas. Turns out our bacteria is not very fussy. it will eat any gas as long as it has carbon in it. And we can also take atmospheric CO2. It's a little bit further out, but we've proved it in principle, because there's still a lot of, you saw that curve, there's a lot of CO2 out there. And so we can partner with other technology companies who can capture that CO2, give it to us, and then we feed it to the bacteria. And so if you think about what we can do, and sorry, some of the things have been cut off, but here we're saying we can make fuels, we can make textiles, we can make packaging, we can make all sorts of things from this carbon pollution. And when it comes to the end of its life, so if imagine the fuels do have to be burnt, because you combust fuels to get the power you need to move forward, then you could work with those partners who collect that CO2 and give it to us. So it's going back in the cycle. But this is really cool. Imagine the clothes have reached the end of their useful life, or you've got garment waste, or you've got packaging waste. And not everything is recycled or is recyclable today. Imagine that could be turned back into a gas and it goes round again. So you've got this whole new idea of circularity. That carbon doesn't need to leave the material cycle. And the reason we can do this is because, and I mentioned I'm a biologist, biology is amazing. Biology takes chaos and creates order. So a lot of times if we think about refineries, they use thermocatalysis. It has to be very clean gas, it's very expensive, it has to be very pure. You know, it's more stringent, whereas biology is kind of, yeah, whatever, we'll take it, we'll see what we can do. And that is why biology is so cool and can do all sorts of things. Because if you think about steel mills and municipal solid waste dumps, I get to go to the beauty spots of the world, is not, you don't imagine it's a very orderly process. Like gas, pollution gas, it fluctuates. So this blue line here just shows you the concentration fluctuates. But this is what our bacteria produces. It's pretty linear. This is a picture of the input gases from a trash, like from landfill. It fluctuates a lot, but the bacteria doesn't care. It's pretty steady. And that's what's so important about using biology to create this kind of order. So when we think about biomanufacturing today, it's still very much based in those kind of plant-based bio. We think about biomanufacturing, we think about plants. But if we think about the future, we can think about using things like bacteria and synthetic biology to make all those materials and chemicals that we need. Because we can take those types of feedstocks and we can create all those chemicals through ancient biological pathways. So take a minute to tell you a little bit about our bug, our bacteria. It's actually one of the most ancient organisms on Earth, and it originated in those thermal vents under the ocean billions and billions of years ago. And if you think about those thermal vents, they look incredibly like flue stacks at big industrial sites. And that was kind of how we came up with the idea all these years ago. We went, well, the biology of that could work here. It's a pretty unpleasant environment there, similarly here. And we realized very quickly that bacteria could really hold the key to making a lot of materials in a more sustainable way. So I showed you a picture of one of our plants. These are 4 of the plants that we have in China. And something that will become increasingly important as you're making materials in the material space is getting third-party certification. So Joanne talked a little bit about this in different areas in the production side. It's very much the same thing on the chemical production side. So we actually work with 2 global organizations, one called the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials, RSB, and the other one is ISCC. And what they do is they will come to our facility, and they have, RSB as an example, has 12 kind of tenets of sustainability. employee welfare, from water use, biodiversity, how the factory's being made, the life cycle of your products that are coming out of the factory, and so on. It's a pretty rigorous auditing process. Us as a company selling that product has to also go through certification and auditing so we can trade it. And that becomes really important when you think about sustainability of materials. It's the chain of custody from our factory in China to the conversion facility, maybe in another country, to where we're selling it to the end user. And you want to make sure there isn't a kind of squeaky wheel along the way who doesn't adhere to your values or your principles and so on. So certification is very important when you are doing this. This was not something we thought about when we started. We were just thinking about the science, but we quickly realized what's important to the end users, to our customers. These are 2 more plants that will be coming up. They're kind of starting up now. And actually, I think you should be able to see, should start, let me go to play it. Just to give you a sense of scale, so this is the site in Belgium. Like, pictures are all well and good, but you can't beat a little bit of drone footage, I don't know if there's a little human for scale. So these are the microbreweries where the magic is happening. So that's here in Europe. This is our first facility in Europe. And so when we have those 6 sites all fully operating at commercial scale, it will be a pathway to kind of gigatons of carbon abatement just on the sort of avoided emissions side from industry. But we're also going to be making about 300,000 tons of ethanol a year. So I don't know about you, but I kind of wonder what on earth you want to do with 300,000 tons of ethanol. It's quite a lot. And as we increasingly go to electric vehicles, it's not as needed in the road transport sector. So I briefly mentioned aviation. So aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. So we've developed a process to convert that ethanol into a sustainable aviation fuel. Picture of that as we landed. This was the flight that we took. But we can also convert that ethanol into materials. So I talked a little about sort of a steel mill partnering with a company like Zara. Can you imagine a steel mill working with L'Oreal? So this was making a plastic bottles, shampoo and conditioner bottles. These are prototypes. They haven't been on the market yet. But made from pollution. I mean, it was a really fascinating sort of industrial symbiosis. Steel mills working with the cosmetics sector. Who would have thought it? Ethanol is actually in a lot of cleaning products. So this is actually a Swiss company where they replaced all the ethanol in their household cleaning products because they didn't want to have biodiversity issues, land use change, water problems, and they stuck it in the cleaning products. So I think they had a nice tagline like "Clean your floor and clean the planet." From a fashion sense, you've got to wash your clothes. So thinking about laundry detergent, actually laundry detergent comes from fossil carbon. There's something in detergent called surfactants, which make it sort of soapy, and that comes from fossil carbon today. And so we can actually make those, and that can be used to wash your clothes. And this one's quite an interesting one because they also are trying to make laundry detergent. So this is with a partner, Unilever, trying to make detergents for, and you'll see this increasingly, for more cold water washes. So again, it's thinking about your garments in terms of their usage, less water use. We've been working with other partners on the manufacture of the garments and the dyes that are used for washing and so on. Carbon is also in this stuff, EVA foam. So EVA foam on the soles of trainers comes from fossil carbon. I mean, as does the uppers and so on. But this is a prototype running shoe. It's probably one of the most expensive trainers in the world. There's 4 of them. I wasn't allowed to bring one today because it was in the States, but it's very cool. But the EVA foam is made from recycled emissions. It's very cool. This is with the running or the outdoor running company On. And then I showed you contents of products, but actually we're making packaging as well. And this is where we look at taking that ethanol and making the building blocks to make PET, which is made into polyester, and I'll get into the fashion side shortly. And then the Gucci perfume. So what is often very surprising is that people think aviation has the biggest carbon footprint of all. But if you can remember what my number was for the picture of the plane, it's very much not as big as the fashion industry. And this largely comes from a lot of the synthetic fibres or the ingredients to go into synthetic fibres, but also on the infrastructure used for growing things as well. So if we're looking at plant-based products, cotton and so on, and there's a lot of environmental impact here. So the fashion industry has really got an opportunity to lead in what we call sort of the energy transition and materials transition. And it's so exciting to be working with people in this industry who are getting products out to consumers who then start to think about, oh, where did my carbon come from in the other things I bought? And maybe I should be thinking about that going forward. So the first fabric we made was with Lululemon, who were making sort of yoga clothing and running shorts. And they actually made a fabric, and this is one where they really focused on the dyes used to make the fabric, again for thinking about what the usage would be, and also the production of the fabric and how many chemicals they'd be using in the dye that they made. I mentioned Zara. What's quite interesting is some of the labels that have been on the garments, because how do you maybe talk about recycling carbon and the chemistry behind the fabric for someone who wants to buy a cocktail dress at Christmas? I mean, maybe they're not that interested. Interestingly, they said their collection sold out within days because there was a lot of interest, and they ran 2 more collections. But it was trying to write about the science because they wanted to be transparent and provide the greenhouse gas data on a party frock. And these maybe would be people who wouldn't be so connected to the outdoors, where I could see on a Craghoppers label people might be more interested in it. And it was a really interesting journey to go through with a company like Zara, thinking about the audience of their garments versus a more sporty outdoors one. We've actually also worked with another company that comes under a lot of pressure in terms of fast fashion, and it's actually H&M Move, so they're slightly different from H&M, but workout wear, where they wanted to also move away from fossil carbon in their synthetic fibres, much like Zara did. And this is actually with Adidas, who did a capsule collection for the Melbourne Tennis Cup, Tennis Open, at the beginning of this year. And also wanted to talk about sustainable building blocks and how they were making it. Now, of course, we're coming up to my favourite piece. This is actually the only one I have bought and wear all the time. And when I heard about the next collection, I was like, oh my God, this is going to cost me so much money. I have to buy everything. My family all wear Craghoppers, so I was buying all their stuff. So love it, but slow down. But it's so cool because, I mean, Joanne said a fleece is accessible. A lot of people have a fleece lying around, and I actually feel like fleeces become part of your, I mean, most people have a fleece that's been in the cupboard for like a long time, and it's sort of part, or maybe that's just us, but it sticks around like Lego, there's always some Lego hanging around, there's always a fleece. And it feels just really appropriate because it was so accessible. I went back to our headquarters in Chicago last week with fleeces everywhere. Everybody had on a fleece. I've never seen that with any of the other products that we've made. Granted, the cocktail dresses were only for 50% of the team, but not with Adidas or Lulu or anything like that. The fleeces, everybody found that they wanted one, and they were saying, yeah, I bought them for my family because finally it was a product that people could wear on a sort of regular basis. And so I talked a little bit about how we do it. So we make ethanol. So how does the ethanol get to the fleece? Well, polyester is actually made from an ingredient called monoethylene glycol, MEG, and another chemical called PTA. And so what we do is we make the MEG, which today comes from a fossil ingredient. And so we can replace that MEG component, which you can make from ethanol. And so we partner, we don't convert the ethanol ourselves, we make the ethanol, we ship it to a partner who converts it into MEG, and then that goes, it gets converted into the yarn that gets spun into the garments. And so that is how steel mill emissions end up as a garment. I know I waited till this time to tell you that. I was trying to keep you in suspense about how does it work. And so the idea there is, and I loved what we were talking about before, you know, the garments can be repaired and it can be put back into the material cycle. Eventually, things do come to the end of their useful life. But also, if you think about manufacturing, and as you go into your future careers in sort of garment manufacturing design, increasingly I think people are looking to reduce garment waste as they're producing, but there could be garment waste in factories and so on. So if we think about taking whatever is not used and putting that back into the material cycle and turning it back into something, you've got this circular carbon economy. And that becomes so important because if we think about waste, and I can show you these big numbers, but the one thing that always blows my mind is that of all the plastic that's ever been made since plastic was invented, and I think bizarrely plastic was invented in East London. And someone told me that recently, because they have a company called Not Plastic, and they're actually based where plastic was invented. So if you think about, in East London, plastic was invented, and how much plastic's been produced, okay? Only 8% of all the plastic that's ever been produced has been recycled. So where is the rest of that 90+% plastic? It's floating around in the great ocean garbage patch, it's in landfills, it's been incinerated, you know, there is a lot of waste out there. And there's also a lot of textile waste because unfortunately not all companies have the values that Craghoppers has. And so there's a lot of waste that ends up landfilled or incinerated. So we believe that that's an opportunity to turn all that stuff into the sort of the building blocks for fabrics in the future. And interestingly, the policy landscape is changing because there's, especially in Europe, there's a lot of new legislation around talking about unsold consumer products, things that are discarded. There's something called enhanced producer responsibility. So it's very, very important for packaging companies who are thinking about if you have a branded bottle, for example, that ends up on the beach, okay, you're responsible for that as the producer. So like the Coke or a Pepsi or whoever, it's their responsibility that that is now on the beach, even though it was the consumer that threw it on the beach, because they need to create the infrastructure that's putting, that makes recycling easier for people. They need to think about how to reduce the waste and behaviour in their consumers to keep things in a more circular way. And so clearly you can see where we see trash, Americans, we see this as a raw material. So we see waste carbon as this source of, future carbon. I think there's a tendency for people to think that all carbon is bad, but it's not, because it's part of who we are and the fabric of our lives. And so we think about carbon and carbon recycling as incredibly regenerative. We keep this circular system going. We've done this at a scale already, so we've got a municipal solid waste plant in Japan that's been running for a number of years. And we just see this as the principles of that circular carbon economy. And biology enables us to do that, especially synthetic biology. So I alluded to that. So we made ethanol. We actually harness the bacteria's DNA. So we ask it to do stuff that it wouldn't maybe want to do normally. So we can say, okay, you're making ethanol today, but our customer wants to make this chemical because of this, maybe it's a coating application for a garment. And so we would look at the pathway, and we use artificial intelligence and modeling and synthetic biology. It's what I term magic, because it's not my area of expertise. But we can essentially program the bacteria to make these new chemicals. And we have the capability to do all that. So we've actually made these other chemicals, isopropanol, acetone. So a lot of these are used in other applications in the world. We've made packaging, and here you see today we can get, so this is fossil carbon to PET, but if you go ethanol to ethylene oxide, and then you can make MEG, that's what I mentioned. But imagine you could go straight to MEG, and that's what we're working on in the future. So this would improve the carbon footprint even further of the packaging or materials that we're making. This is a partnership we're working on this specific pathway with Danone. So you know the food and beverage giants, and they're looking at packaging because of this new legislation. How do we increase the sustainability of our products? And so if you think about what we do, and I showed you pictures of that steel mill. Today we're making ethanol, but tomorrow we could be making any number of different chemicals. And it's interesting because today in the chemical sector, you have to predict 5 years down the line what you're going to make because you have to build a new chemical plant. But with this, you just drop a new one in, drop a new bacteria in. So it's a bit like your phone. Instead of buying a new phone, you can just update your software. And the bacteria and biology help you essentially update your bacteria software, and you can make all sorts of cool things. So you're not limited by, you're only limited by your imagination, really, because you can start thinking about what you can make. And so, as I mentioned, today we're making polyester with ethanol, but tomorrow we could be making polyester directly through this pathway. And so what I want you to sort of take away today is the importance of carbon. And you may not have made a connection between carbon and fashion, but it very much is there. And I think it's really important that we think about where the carbon in our garments or in our lives comes from. This circular carbon economy is not new. It's a kind of old biology trick. We used to joke about, if you think about the cherry tree and all the blossoms fall down and becomes the mulch and it helps it grow. And so nature is this regenerative carbon cycle. And that's what we're trying to do with all that above ground carbon. So that's who we are, and that's how we're engaged with the fashion space. And really, I suppose what I want you all to think about, if I have one takeaway for you all, is to kind of interrogate the carbon in your lives today and going forward. Today, there's not that many things you can get. We're working on it, and there are others in this space. But in the future, our vision is that this becomes embedded in all supply chains. So you can make a choice, just like you can choose organic food or fair trade products, recycled paper goods, and so on. You can choose recycled carbon in your supply chains. And with that, I will leave you.